Good morning and welcome to Capitol Download. Derek, this week I spoke with Congressman John Lewis, Democrat of Georgia. He helped make history in the civil rights movement during the 1960s.
And Lewis in particular was on the front lines when marchers faced down state troopers, tear gas, and nightsticks in the march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. You know, this was a moment that changed America. 50 years ago this week, 600 black and white civil rights activists attempted to march from Selma, Alabama to the state capital of Montgomery. Their goal? A peaceful protest as blacks in the South were being denied the right to register to vote despite the Civil Rights Act. But on March 7, 1965, a day now referred to as Bloody Sunday, state troopers and local police brutally beat and tear gassed the marchers as they attempted to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge. A few weeks later, with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at the helm and flanked by the protection of the U.S. Army and National Guard, activists successfully completed the 54-mile trek over 3 days. They were met by an additional 50,000 supporters as they arrived in Montgomery, and one young man, John Lewis, marched at the head of the pack alongside Dr. King. Now, Congressman Lewis, he shares his story of Selma.
It will be a historic moment to go back there. On that bridge in 1965, we were just walking slowly on our way to Selma, from Selma to Montgomery. I was wearing a backpack before it became fashionable to wear backpacks. In that backpack, I had 2 books. I thought we were going to be arrested and in jail, so I wanted to have something to read. I had an apple and I had an orange in the backpack, something to eat. And since I thought I was going to be in jail with my friends, my colleagues and neighbors, I had toothpaste and toothbrush. I wanted to be able to brush my teeth. We get to the highest point on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, crossing the Alabama River. Down below we saw a sea of blue, Alabama state troopers. And we continued to walk until we came within hearing distance of the state troopers. And a man spoke up and said, "I am Major John Cloud of the Alabama State Troopers. This is an unlawful march. You will not be allowed to continue. I give you 3 minutes to disperse, return to your homes, or to your church."
Go home or go to your church.
And the young man walking beside me from Dr. King's organization said, "Major, give us a moment to kneel and pray." And the major said, "Troopers, advance." And you saw these men putting on their gas masks, and they came toward us, beating us with nightsticks, trapping us with horses, and releasing their tear gas.
You have a scar still visible on your forehead from the beating that you got from a police officer on that day. What does that mean to you?
Looking in the mirror, I tend to notice it, but I don't pay it too much attention. But it just reminds me that some of us gave a little blood on that bridge to redeem the soul of America, to make America better. I thought I was going to die on that bridge. I thought it was the last nonviolent protest. But somehow, in some way, I'm still here.
You told our friend Bob Schieffer that President Obama would not be president today if not for Selma. How so?
If it hadn't been for Selma, there would be no Barack Obama as president. Selma helped make it possible for hundreds and thousands of people in the South to become registered voters and encourage people all across America to become participants in the democratic process.
So when you began that march with your backpack and your apple and your orange and your 2 books, did you have any idea it would have the impact that it has had?
At the time we were walking and marching from Selma to Montgomery, I didn't have any idea that it would have the impact that it still is having on the very psyche of America.
I was reading in preparation for this interview a speech that you wrote in 1963 about the Civil Rights Act of 1963, criticizing it because it didn't do enough to combat police brutality against racial minorities, certainly an issue that's in the headlines these days.
I think there is still a major problem between local communities and local police departments. We must teach our police officers the way of peace, the way of love, the way of nonviolence. They should attend nonviolent workshops, human relation meetings, the same way we did during the 60s. In some places, people are doing just that.
But one of the points that you made when you were in your 20s and working in the civil rights movement was that the federal government had an obligation to do more to protect its citizens, including its black citizens, to enforce the laws that were already on the books. Do you still feel that way? Do you want the federal government to do more when it comes to these cases of unarmed black men being shot by police officers?
I would like to see the federal government do more. Back in 1963, when I spoke at the March on Washington, I raised the question, I want to know which side is the federal government on. The government must lead the way.
I have your 1998 memoir here, Walking with the Wind, and also a new book that's coming out now, which is a graphic novel, the second in a series about your life and your work. Why have you agreed to cooperate with this very interesting and quite different kind of book?
Well, one of my staff members, who was my communication director during my 08 campaign, encouraged me. And I remember back in the 60s, late 50s really, reading a comic book called Martin Luther King Jr. and the Montgomery Story. 14 pages, it sold for 10 cents. And this little book inspired me to attend nonviolent workshops, to study about Gandhi, about Thoreau, to study Martin Luther King Jr., to study civil disobedience.
You have just celebrated your 75th birthday. Happy birthday.
But thank you very much.
You are the only person still living who spoke at the March on Washington in 1963. You were just 25 when you were leading that march on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Did you think at that point that you'd be here, that we'd be here as a country?
I never dreamed during those days that I would have an opportunity to serve in the Congress and see a man of color elected president.
When President Obama stands on the bridge, when he speaks at the 50th anniversary commemoration, what would you like to hear him say?
Oh, I'd just like for him to talk about the history of what happened on the bridge and what it means to America, to see the distance we've come and the progress we've made during the past 50 years.
When they do commemorate the march this week, Congressman Lewis will be joined not only by President Obama, but also by President George W. Bush. And check out this tidbit. Lewis, as you heard, said a comic book helped inspire him to follow Dr. King's path.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So perhaps we should not be all that surprised to learn that Lewis has co-written his own graphic novel trilogy telling his story. And I'll be speaking with the co-author of those books a little later in the show. But first, D.C. was swarmed by conservatives this week, and they are in the hunt for a presidential candidate. Our roundtable takes on CPAC right after the break.